Another episode of Live with Littledata. I'm Edward Upton, and I'm joined today by Tom Cox from Swanky, our agency partner. Welcome, Tom.
Hello.
So I think, Tom, you've been doing a lot with GA4 for the last few months, I know, and I thought it'd be great to have a chat about some of the things you're doing to actually basically lift under the covers of what's happening with attribution in GA4, maybe getting people a bit more confident in data-driven models. But tell us first of all, what's your experience been the last few months? I mean, you said you were actually a relative newbie to universal analytics, so perhaps it was less of a shock to you. But how have you been finding it relative to universal?
I think generally I find the whole concept, the whole model, quite simple compared to universal. I think the event-based model I feel is just a lot more intuitive. You don't have to worry so much about mixing scopes. And I mean we've been using GA4 for about a year now, or at least we implemented it a year ago. But I think in the last 3 months that's where we've really had to kind of pivot and get under the hood and figure out how does it work in the absence of universal. But I think it's been really successful. We like a lot of the new features. Feels more flexible, and I'm seeing more content, more resources coming out every week. So I think as a kind of community, I think we're on the right path.
Yeah, I think that's inevitable, isn't it? I mean, I guess the cold start problem is that not only the sort of super data experts were probably setting up a year ago, so the majority of the content's only sort of being created the last few months, and so there's a lot more, and I've seen a lot more people doing clever stuff, exporting the data into BigQuery and all those sort of things recently. But I think you had a few explorations that you've used internally that you thought might be interesting to share. So I'd love to see what you've been doing.
Let me dive in, and we'll. So one of the things that I think, hopefully you can see that. So I think one of the things that we found over the last few months, I'm just going to make that a nice size. Maybe there was kind of a confusion initially around some of the dimensions, particularly session-based dimensions, first user, and then attributed. And I'm not sure, I don't think Google helps themselves sometimes, but when we're looking at some of the basic out-of-the-box reporting, so I'm on Google's merch store at the moment. So some of our clients are coming and saying, okay, I'm seeing this number in universal based on last click, and then they'll jump in, they'll go on a traffic acquisition report, and then they'll say, okay, well, Google is GA4 is reporting this much revenue coming through direct. Why are those two numbers not matching up? And they might even ask, okay, I thought this was a data-driven model. Why is this, what is this number? And I think there's just been a lot of confusion around that. And our initial point of call has really been to direct towards the advertising section. So I think, it's worth being aware that when we're looking at this out-of-the-box traffic acquisition, we are looking at session-based dimensions. So really, we're looking at each individual session. What was the traffic source for that session? Likewise, if we jump to one of the user acquisition reports, we're then really looking at, okay, what was the first touch point for the user? Which channel is bringing the user to the site? And I think just understanding that difference early on, I think has been really helpful. But I think moving on, and this is what my kind of explore demo will talk about, neither of these are really showing attributed kind of the new modeling features that GA4 has got. So the advertising section, this is where Google start to show some of this. So if you jump into a model comparison, and I'm actually just going to filter by the purchase event here. So now you'll see there's a subtle difference in the dimension names here. So we don't have session or first user explicitly stated. We just have default channel group, source medium. And this is really where we're looking at, okay, using the new attribution models, whether you've got data driven or the traditional last non-direct click, we're now able to see, okay, how is revenue being attributed to the different channels.
And perhaps just for those who aren't aware, perhaps worth just stepping out a little bit about what data-driven problem data-driven is supposed to solve. I mean, I think that there's always been this sort of fight in marketing circles about what's the right attribution model, and Google's approach, which I think is the right one, even sort of before the days of AI hype a while ago, was to say, look, actually, let's use our algorithm to go over all of the, if the brand's got enough conversion events, we can actually sort of basically look at the incrementality, like what did this channel actually bring the customer to purchase, or would the customer purchase anyway? Because certain channels, email marketing particularly, right, have always got over attributed just because they happen to be the end of the funnel. Like, you were kind of going to buy anyway. You get that email in your inbox saying, hey, you didn't complete your purchase. Yes, obviously some of that does win back customers, but on the whole, they were, that wasn't the hard work. The hard work sort of done further up the funnel by other channels.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think UA really only had last non-direct click, whereas GA4, we found, particularly for our top of funnel marketing campaigns, we're now starting to see more revenue attributed. So yeah, and I think that's probably a helpful point for me to, if I move on to the explore, and just show some useful things we've learned really over the last few months. So I'm going to jump in, and I'm just going to start from fresh here. So I know you've talked about the explore section quite a bit, so I'm going to move fairly quickly. But we're going to go in, and you'll see we have attributed dimensions in here. So as a reminder, this is going to be using the attribution model set up in the account. So I'm just going to bring in source medium. And then if we go down to traffic source, this is where we'll have those two that I talked about. So first user, and also we've got all of our session based. And all of this really is going to be driven off UTM parameters of users, sessions starting on site. So I'm going to import those three. And then the other one I'm going to add, I'm just going to search for it, is the transaction ID. One of the things we've started to do, in part, we've just wanted to understand a bit, how is Google, like how are the models working, looking at a transaction level, trying to say, okay, well, where has this been attributed? Is it organic search? Is it a paid campaign? So this is where this explore has come in. I'm going to pull in some metrics. I'm going to get purchase revenue. And then I'm also just going to put in sessions.
While you're doing that, Tom, I'm just going to, we had a bit of a glitch apparently with the LinkedIn live stream. So we only went live a minute ago. So perhaps I just, for those who are late to the event, just recap where we got to so far. So we're kind of looking at drilling into the explorations in GA4 to have a look at kind of how, as you say, how you can really explore what the data-driven model's doing and how that's comparing, as you say, to things like the first user attribution. So yeah, please take it away.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do, we're going to bring in the rows, we'll take the transaction ID, and then we're going to put purchase revenue. So you see we've got all of the IDs recorded over the last 28 days. So this is all your purchase events, basically. And then the addition we're going to do is we're going to add in the columns, we're going to add our attributed source medium. And what we'll see here is that for each order, we're now going to get it kind of split out by the different.
So just to be clear, when you say attributed, we mean we're using the properties default channel. So in this case, sorry, default model. So in this case, data driven.
Yes, yeah. So on the demo account, yeah, it's data driven. Now normally this report wouldn't be all that interesting. As you can see, a lot of the orders, 100% of the revenue has been attributed to maybe a single channel. I think where this is interesting, and this is where we've used it a bit more, is you'll see that some orders are actually split across more than one of the different source mediums. Now, I've actually pulled out an example, so I'm going to cheat a little bit and grab an order that I found earlier. So you'll see I'm looking at this transaction ID, and Google has split the purchase revenue between two different source mediums. So we've got a referral source here, and we've got Google Organic, so coming through their organic search. And I think what's quite nice about this is we're actually seeing, okay, well, it's attributed approximately 78% of revenue to referral, and then the remainder to organic. And I think we're starting to use this a bit more, particularly for our kind of cross-channel marketing campaigns. We're able to say, okay, like, let's look at some of the orders from yesterday, like what's been attributed where. And yeah, just, I think what's quite nice about this is a bit of a sense check, getting a bit of insight into how the modeling is actually working.
Yeah. And also the fact that it's not just sort of splitting it half and half, it's actually doing a kind of an algorithmic allocation of that revenue.
Yeah, and you can see it's gone right down to a 2 decimal point percentage level. So I think we're still at a point where I think data driven is a bit of a black box, and I know that can be a bit frustrating. So and we've kind of felt that a bit. But what's quite nice, and this is kind of the next part of the exploration, is we've played around with just using segments in Explore to really understand, for this specific transaction, what journey has that user taken to make a purchase. And we can do that really, really quickly from here just by right-clicking on the transaction ID. We can create a segment based on that selection.
Cool. So this is basically users. It's a user segment that have made this purchase, which in fact only be one user, right?
Should only be one, hopefully, unless you've got duplicate orders coming through.
No, it says includes one user though.
Yeah, so you can see it's just pre-populated this for us. So I'm just going to save that segment. So in another tab here, we can go, if we go on to another freeform report. Now I dragged in some other dimensions earlier, so I'm going to use some of these this time. So in the rows, I'm going to look at, so to understand across multiple sessions, that's where I'm going to use the session source medium.
Right, because I guess source medium will always be the same, right, for the user. It's sort of,
yeah, it would be for the user, and it should be for first user source medium. They'll only ever have one.
Yeah.
And then I'm also going to grab, I didn't bring it in earlier, but I'm going to take the date just so I can get a bit of a timeline of user interaction as well. So we're going to put that in. And then in the columns, we'll take oh no, we don't need anything in the columns, that's fine. And then we're going to put in the values here, we'll add sessions. So just adding in some metrics in here.
Okay.
And then we're just going to sort it in date order here. Now, it hasn't applied the segment, so let's just do that first.
Right. So this is that now we're looking at the one user.
Yeah. So now we can see, based on the last 28 days, the different interactions for this user. And importantly, we can see this session here on the 15th of September. They made a purchase.
Right.
You might ask, where is the organic session? Because it says in here that 22% went to organic. Now, if we actually go back a bit further, so I'm going to go back to the start of July here.
Yeah. Again, probably this has got a 90-day attribution window set up on this account.
Yeah. So we can now see that this user actually first came to the site. I'm making an assumption it's the first time, but on the 6th of July, they came through organic search. They spent 2 minutes in that session.
And
And
then
you can see we're kind of going down this timeline now, and
Yeah.
we can see all of the different touch points.
Cool. So basically, just make sure I've understood that right. So within this attribution window, basically they've come from organic search, and then another click on paid search. I think about 20 days later, the 20th of July, isn't it? And then a couple of sessions from site referral from sites.google, and then a few more throughout. More recently, actually in September, and then you say they finally purchased on the 15th. So yeah. You can sort of see the logic there, can't you? Okay, so Google Organic was the first touch, so it's kind of quite valuable. They brought them at the top of the funnel, but equally there was obviously a lot of not just one referral from sites.google, but lots to get them to buy.
Yeah, and I think it'd be great if Google were to add in maybe a more obvious kind of UI way of us doing this. I know we've been using Triple Whale to do a similar thing.
Yeah.
They have a feature where you can click on a channel and actually look at all of the individual orders that are making up revenue, and actually looking at that order and saying, okay, what are all the different touch points?
Right.
So
you can sort of debug marketing attribution effectively, but it does the same job. Just
absolutely.
A bit less pretty, perhaps.
Yeah, and what's really nice is going back to this view. If for some reason we wanted to switch maybe to a first click model, we can do that, and it will update all of the attributed reporting on the fly, so it's not a static thing. So again, that's another nice feature we found.
Great. Just a prompt to ask a question if you have anything as we go along. So yeah, thanks, Tom. That's really interesting. I mean, I think, as you say, perhaps just a quick plug for Littledata, which is that obviously the value that we're bringing is that if you're not getting all of your orders in there, or if those orders can't be linked to a session, then or the user more specifically, then you say that data-driven attribution is not really that valuable, because it's only valuable where you can actually get a long user journey that you can link together and sort of see that history. So I think that's in a nutshell one of the things we're trying to solve for brands, is to be able to get as complete a user journey as possible, exactly so you can get the most sensible attribution of those events. Now, there's a bit of a debate in ecom, right, whether to have a longer attribution window, a shorter one. I personally think that depends on your kind of type of product you're selling. Yeah, there are clearly high consideration purchases. I mean, I started my kind of analytics career with like made.com, and clearly if you're buying a sofa, 90 days is definitely the minimum you want to be over, because it's not a purchase you make within a week. But if you're fast fashion, then maybe having attribution window of 30 days makes more sense, or even 7.
I think one of the learnings we've had from this is just how important it is, just having a robust GA4 setup. A lot of that example I've just given is, one of the prerequisites is that you can track that user across, that was about 2 or 3 months of activity. So if if you're not able to unify sessions, if you're not utilizing some of the user identity features, which I know you've mentioned at times it doesn't work 100%. But having that in place is really important.
Yeah, exactly. There's no magic bullet to, if the user's using ad blocker or close their cookies or something, it's still going to interrupt that journey. But I think what Littledata is trying to do is to the best possible extent, sort of triangulate that back to the actual Shopify customer and make sure that persists where possible. And obviously that's particularly true with recurring orders from subscription brands. I know you work with a lot of those. So great. So I think you also had another thing you want to share about Google Sheets, which would be really interesting to.
So recently Google launched their Google Sheets add-on, which we've been waiting for. We use at Swanky, we've used the old add-on quite a lot, particularly. I think just, it's a format that we're used to working in. A lot of the CRO work, testing work we were doing, we want to build like statistical models within Sheets. So a lot of the time we're kind of exporting data out of GA and then doing work, building charts, all of that. So, Yeah, so I thought it'd just be useful just showing one or two things, some learnings.
So just to be clear, so this is you've built one in Swanky, but now there's like a standard GA4 plugin for Google Sheets. You can go.
Yeah, there is, which is, I'd say, is still a bit of a work in progress. So here we go.
You might want to zoom a bit, I think, just to make it a bit bigger.
Yeah, so we're using, and I can post a link later. We're using the add-on for Sheets that Google have released, and I've kind of pre-populated this. So you can see I've got the property ID from GA4 that's in the settings, and I've pre-populated this with one or two dimensions and metrics. There's lots of resources out there. There's an API dimensions and metrics document. This has everything listed out for a standard property. So, if I wanted to look at maybe like a first user dimensions, they're all listed here. So just be a case of copying that and pasting that into here. You'll see I've actually got this custom event affiliation. Now we're using a GA4 property that is using Littledata to do all of the GA4 tracking. So we've set up several custom dimensions already. So what I'm looking at here are those custom dimensions. So I'm looking at the GA DevTools site, which basically just loads, here are all the dimensions you've set up, here are all the metrics you've set up.
Yeah. So we covered this a couple of weeks ago, but just recap those in. Like there's affiliation as a standard sort of e-commerce property, which is in our case we map the Shopify tags so you can understand where the order came from, the order tags. But you have to set it up as a custom dimension. Hence why, as you say, when you're pulling in the reports, it's custom events : whatever it is.
Yeah, and you can see that I've actually helpfully named it Shopify tag. Just helpful in the UI. And you can see we've got some others, like we've started testing on this account. So we're pulling in, campaign names, campaign IDs from the testing platform.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can see I've actually pulled in this custom event affiliation in here. So I'm just going to run this report. I think what's nice here is, if you want to build a really quick report showing, for this client, it's showing the split between maybe subscriptions and orders through the main store, or maybe, we've tagged orders with these are wholesale orders, these are D2C, this is a VIP customer, whatever really. So you can see it's run the report. It actually tells us how many kind of API tokens have been used, and it's pulled out for that dimension all of the different tags that are used. So in this case, anything marked Shopify just didn't have a tag, so it's come through the online store.
Yep.
You can see the tab below. We've got subscription first order.
So this is a recurring order. This is a subscription brand, so they can differentiate between the first time and subscription, first time subscriptions and one-time orders on Shopify.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then from here it's a case of we can work in a familiar workflow if we want to do the standard building out charts. We've got that option. The other report I've run just in the background there, just linked to the example that I showed in Explore. So you can see that I'm using default channel group. Now this is an attributed dimension. So it's going to use Google's attribution model, which in tandem with gross purchase revenue, we're going to get that similar view. Now, in the output, you'll see that there's a row for every order, and some of these rows are duplicated. What we've been doing is using this, creating a quick pivot table in Google Sheets, and a similar format as to what we had before, really. So, very quickly,
got it,
building out a view of revenue split by the different channels. And like one of the things we've used this for is to do like a quick view of, which orders have shared attribution. So
right.
I think what's nice is, anyone who's used Sheets or Excel before, you're using familiar functions to quickly enhance, I suppose, your...
Great. And you can see there, immediately there's a few 2s and 3s in there.
Yeah, and you know, we're now, let's just bring all these columns in a little bit. Yeah, we've now got a really quick view of shared modeling going on here.
And actually, I think this is a much easier way to kind of because when you first started sharing that one about the model comparison tool, it's like an overview, but it's really hard to understand at that level what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
As you say here, you can really understand that, you know, I mean, first of all, the reality that most orders are not split between channels. There's one clear, or maybe there's just, we only know about one session that when they purchased.
Yeah.
But the fact that, you know, how it's working and the interaction effects, because I think that's the really interesting thing here, isn't it? Like, yeah, which channels are complementary, which channels sort of go together.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we'd be able to build up that kind of reporting. You know, you've still got the option here of, if I want to drill down, you know, I can do a quick drill down and see, okay, you know, this order is split. This is how it's split, you know, across those two channels.
Really clever.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking us through that. I mean, I do think those. Yeah, I think you make a really good point there that you say for a lot of people like yourself who are, you know, experienced analysts, but not necessarily from a sort of you know, Google Analytics background, as you say, doing it, manipulating in a spreadsheet format is just quicker. And also, actually, bottom line is you know, it is quicker. One of the, you know, annoying things perhaps at GA4 is a bit, you know, when you're trying to add filters and stuff, there's a bit of a lag. And so you can just sort of slice and dice things a bit more quickly. And then obviously, as you say, the advantage that you can then maybe automate stuff. So you can have a standard sort of calculation, set of calculations, and then you can pull in the new data every day or week and rerun it.
Yeah, and I think I'd say a lot of analysts, they're very, you know, they want assurance. They want to be able to go like right down to granular micro level. And I, you know, this isn't quite BigQuery, but it's at least, you know, I can say, okay, I sort of understand now how, you know, maybe how data driven is working. I think that example transaction there, you know, we could see that organic was the first touch point for the user, but maybe wasn't the most engaging part of the journey. Whereas, you know, further down that referral, you know, ultimately that's where they converted. So yeah, you know, it's been really, really helpful, and you know, all of this just not possible in UA, so it's been quite refreshing in GA4 to have access to this.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's about all we've got time for in this session. So thank you very much for joining us. I do think it's really great to hear like how this stuff's being used in the real world, and you know, I know that as I say, you part of your job, this has been very important to explore how it can be used. So yeah, great tips. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. We can get back to you. And thank you, Tom. I hope you can join us again sometime.
Yeah, thanks, Ed.
See you soon. Bye.
Yeah.